I was diagnosed with bone cancer when I was 12. We first found it kind of by accident. I was hiking in the woods and I tripped and fell over a tree root. And the next day my leg was swollen and it really hurt. And over time that swelling was just not going away. So we finally went into the doctor's office and she looked at it and knew what it was right away. I wasn't scared of it per se because I didn't know to be scared of it. That I wasn't afraid of death or anything at that point because I didn't know that cancer could lead to death. That kind of came later. As soon as I got diagnosed, I had to go on crutches because it basically causes fragile bones. So a lot of kids first get diagnosed because they break a bone and then they find the tumor there because it eats away at the natural bone. At that point, my doctors told me that I was going to do a limb salvage procedure to actually remove the tumor. So I found out when I was 12 that I would probably never run or jump or things like that again. And that was hard to hear. I was not happy with that particular decision with the limb salvage, because even at that point I knew that amputees can do things like that. And so my first thought was, I don't really want to do that particular surgery, I want to do an amputation. So there was some conflict with my doctors at that point. It wasn't really a choice for me, amputation versus limb salvage. The doctor chose for me. I did not get any of the secondary cancers, I guess, or relapses. So I was done after 9 months. I didn't have anything in my lungs. It was just the one bony tumor in my leg. And then the first limb salvage I had failed. So the screws they put into my femur never set properly. After, I think it was about a year, I ended up actually switching surgeons because I could never walk within that first year. And he took an x-ray and right away he showed me on the screen there was a screw floating in my leg. And he said that that had probably never actually adhered to the bone. It had probably been that way since it got put in. It just kind of fell out early on and they missed it. I'm not sure how they missed it. It was pretty obvious, even to somebody in a non-medical area, that the screw goes in the leg. And I had multiple lengthenings of my implant over time. It's just about an inch-long incision in the top of the knee. And they put a screwdriver in basically and turn it a couple of times and it makes the femur longer. Partway through college, I had to get a piece of plastic put in on the back of my patella because I had rubbed all the cartilage off and I could feel it. I also got a couple of pacemakers put in. Chemo never truly leaves your body, so especially in pediatric patients, secondary conditions can show up years down the line. So there was an incident with a physical therapist. One of the side effects of chemotherapy is you get really fragile bones. And she was doing these passive range of motion exercises where you just kind of push at a joint to get some more flexion. And she pushed a little too far and just snapped it. And then she went and did it the other way too, so she pulled it down and snapped it again. And that went undiagnosed for about 6 months, and I got some neurological conditions and issues with bone healing from that. And after that last limb salvage, those issues just started coming up so much that I couldn't walk anymore. So within a year of getting that last limb salvage, I learned how to walk again. And then I was back on crutches because of the foot and ankle. And that's when I ultimately was able to get the amputation. Pretty much had some pain always since the cancer diagnosis. And it was kind of like a wave. It would start to get worse and worse, and then I'd realize that something was wrong and go into the doctor, and they'd find that I had broken a piece of my leg or that there was some other thing wrong, and they'd fix it. And so then I'd have the surgery and, that would hurt, but the goal would be to drop the pain back down again and have a usable limb. And that's what would happen. It would drop, but then it would go up again because something broke. And I'd have to get it fixed. And it was just this cycle of breaking and fixing. And that was one of the most frustrating things with the last leg, was I was having some type of surgery almost every year, which is really interrupting when you're trying to do college and internships. I spent some time in Uganda, and I think I broke my knee there at one point. It made planning ahead really difficult. I could never be sure if I applied for something a year down the line, if I could actually do it, because I might need another surgery. If I was in severe pain and couldn't walk, then that would be really limiting to whatever I was trying to do. I was in the hospital for a scan, on crutches, right, holding my leg up off the ground because I couldn't weight bear on it. But I didn't have a brace on or anything because that didn't help me walk. So I would just go around holding my leg up on crutches, and a nurse got into an elevator after me. And she looked down at my leg and she shrugged her shoulders and said, "Hey, at least it's not that bad." What do you mean it's not that bad? It's about as bad as it gets. It was never so much of a struggle for me to decide to amputate. The struggle was finding somebody willing to do it. So many surgeons don't want to amputate a leg that pretty much looks okay. The metal leg and the ankle, it didn't feel like my leg to me. It really did feel kind of like a thing attached. It didn't flex all the way. I could get it to about 90 degrees and that was it. I didn't have very good feeling in that limb because I had neurological problems. It didn't look like the other leg, really. The femur was longer because I'd had all these lengthening surgeries as a kid, and they could only lengthen the femur, they couldn't do the tibia. So when I sat down, like one foot would be hanging off the ground and my leg kept going numb because my foot couldn't touch the ground on that one side. It wasn't going to kill me if I left it on. It was just non-functional. I had so much metal in there, they would have had to almost amputate at my hip, which leaves a very short limb that's very non-functional, which is exactly what I was trying to avoid. So ultimately I was able to find a surgeon and he went back and did this procedure that really hasn't been done much in a very long time. It's called tibial turnbackplasty. So he took off my ankle, all those bad parts that I wasn't able to use, all the metal from my knee, and then flipped my tibia upside down and attached it to that little piece of femur that I have left with a metal plate. So now I have a calf muscle on top of my leg that still feels like a calf muscle. It's pretty cool. I can touch about halfway up and it feels like it's the back of my ankle. And that was what gave me a really long limb that I should be able to use with a prosthetic really well. Ultimately, the procedure took 7 hours, quite a bit longer than what they initially thought, because my surgeon was trying to get this metal rod out of my tibia. Therefore, he was able to save a lot more of my bone and give me a longer limb, which is really important for actually using a prosthetic. I kind of woke up and everything felt pretty normal, and I was super excited that my leg was gone. So I asked them to pull the blankets back right away to look at it. My mom was there, and I was like looking at it, and I looked over at her, and I was like, I won. I finally got rid of the leg. Because I had been struggling to get rid of it for so long. It was super exciting to look down and like not see that weird kind of rubber leg that I'd had stuck to me for so long. So when I was first diagnosed with cancer, I had a group of friends and we held this Viking funeral for my pet rat that died. And so years later, when I'm finally getting my leg amputated, all those same people came together and we decided to have a Viking funeral for my leg. My friend got a little wooden boat and a rubber leg to put on it. And we stuffed it with matches and pretty much anything flammable that we could find. We had a bottle of lighter fluid as a backup. Luckily, we didn't need that. Lit it on fire, after the sun had set, and everybody had sparklers. People were running in circles around the little kiddie pool to a Viking song that I don't know. I think Siri may have helped out with the Viking song. It was kind of an exciting send-off to the leg. My leg, I know, went to research. So right before the procedure, a woman came out with the form and she asked if I would be willing to donate the tissues to their research project. And she asked if they could take some additional blood samples for their project, and I said that sounded great. If it can be useful, then that's fantastic. I signed her form and everybody was happy. So she has my leg now. And so I do have what's called a phantom limb. It kind of feels like I still have a foot. So even now that I don't have toes, I can wiggle them and feel a muscle in my thigh move. And I'm really lucky. My foot does not hurt anymore, but a big issue that amputees have is phantom pain, so that leg that's not there is still painful for some people. Prosthetic legs are very expensive. I'm an above-the-knee amputee, so for me, I'm going to need a socket, I'll need a knee unit that can bend, and then I'll need a foot. It's kind of the basics of what I'll need. So just the knee unit, the microprocessor, kind of the standard one, about 60,000. When you get into the top line ones, there are some that are approved for military use over 100,000 just for the knee unit. That's not seeing the prosthetist, getting the socket, getting the foot, which you'll need all of those things to be able to use the knee. So I would love to try to run. Insurance does not cover running prostheses. It only covers the walking ones, and it doesn't always cover the one that you want. It oftentimes covers the one that the insurance thinks you should have. Sometimes it doesn't even cover the one the doctors think you should have. Yeah, I think that people probably see me as more disabled now, even though I definitely feel less disabled. Really, I see the amputation as adding more to me than subtracting, which is ironic. But I'm Zoe, I'm 23, and I'm just about done with my undergraduate degree in college, majoring in public health and hoping to move on to med school after this. Been collecting kind of deceased animals and bones since I was really little. I think it started with insects. My grandmother used to send me lizards from Florida that crawled under her fridge and died. My aunt sent me an iguana that died in Florida. I found a dog that got petrified after it crawled underneath a shed and got stuck there over the winter. So I still have all of those things.